Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Now, what does that have to do with this and not helping the homeless in Washington State? Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Governed. And as always, I have a quick trigger warning in the beginning of our message, since we are reporting from Washington State, and I want to make it very clear to everybody that nothing I say here has been approved by Governor Inslee's Ministry of COVID Compliance. And although COVID has nothing to do with the subject we're talking about today, if you only want to listen to what Governor Inslee and the leadership of Washington State want you to hear, please stop watching now, because nothing I'm going to say has been approved by them. Now, as I referenced in kind of the beginning here, there's that famous quote by Shelley in his sonnet from 1818. He actually wrote it in 1817, but it was published in 1818. And it goes like this, the famous line on it anyway is, "My name is Ozymandias, King of kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." And the reason why I kind of point that out is that it was basically a commentary at the time, and of course you can read tons of stories. It's one of the more famous poetry from that era. And there's a lot of commentary about how this is basically talking about just the transitory nature of government and empires and how in the end they all fall. So there's some usefulness there, because I want to tie this into just some of the incompetence and egregious failures that we see all around Washington State today. And one of them I want to talk about is from the great city of Port Townsend out on the peninsula. And it's basically about a 3-year, it's going on, it'll be on its 4th year pretty soon here, project that just has cost millions and millions of dollars, supposedly sold to the public to help the homeless. And of course, every promise has been broken and no homeless has been helped at all. And I really want to call out, because I think this is very important. The best reporting on this has been done by a local website called Port Townsend Free Press. Some of the best investigative journalism, certainly in Jefferson County, Port Townsend area. And Jim Scarantino has just done a phenomenal job documenting over the years all the failures and incompetence and disasters that this project has. And I've linked a lot of those articles down below. I encourage you to go look at them, because he's got a tremendous number of source links, original audio files, original documents. It really just documents this fiasco that just never seems to end. And specifically, when I talk about Port Townsend, Washington, I'm talking about Jefferson County and the small city of Port Townsend. It's a beautiful, picturesque sort of location right on the edge of where Puget Sound and the Straits of Juan de Fuca sort of intersect, and it's really a neat place. I loved going there as a kid. I still like going there today. It is a beautiful place, but it is run by incompetent people, both at the county level and at the city. And the story today, of course, is just simply explaining one of these disasters that they've been experiencing locally, and of course, they don't really want you to know about it. So when I talk about the Cherry Street fiasco, I'm really talking about this building right here that has been sitting there for many years, completely unoccupied, just falling apart, becoming worse every day. And this really started out as a 1950s building that was located in Victoria, BC, and they literally barged it. They took the building off of its foundations, put it on a boat, and they barged it across the Straits of Juan de Fuca to help the homeless, supposedly, in Port Townsend. That's what it was sold to as the public, and of course, it was also originally promised by the bureaucrats and the nonprofits and the politicians to the public. This would only cost $672,000, $672,000 for 8 very modest apartments that might help at the most maybe 16 people at a time, assuming 2 people in an apartment. And of course, the costs rapidly have escalated now to well over $3 million if it's ever going to actually be finished. It's a complete fiasco and disaster from the beginning, and it does stand there as a monument on that hillside, demonstrating just the inevitable failures that seem to occur with all these virtue signaling projects. Here's a photo of the building coming across the water to Port Townsend on the barge. You don't see this every day, not even in Washington State, so it was certainly a picturesque moment and a great example of something that sure sounded cool, and then when it became implementation time, the failure is all they had to show for it. This is what it looked like right after they basically got it off the barge. They stuck it up on pilings, and then it sat there precariously, actually, on these beams and these pilings on the steep hill for a number of years, just going nowhere with nothing happening, nothing to hook up to it. They put the Carmel House, it's sometimes been called the Carmel House, but the Cherry Street Project is usually what they refer to it as. And really, it's just been a complete fiasco. And one of the defining monuments of Port Townsend and their approach to solving the homeless problem, because, of course, they have solved nothing with this. And when we talk about the homeless industrial complex, it requires two different people, at least, two different groups of people. First are the grant grifting nonprofits, the people who are going to take the cash, make the promises they'll never keep, default on those promises that they always do, change their name, and when the fiasco becomes so egregious and then memory hole what they just did, and then of course they keep coming back for more. Now, they wouldn't be able to get anywhere if they didn't have virtue signaling politicians who are happy to make sure they do no due diligence, and they frequently basically just get involved with failures like this, and then they have no consequences for the repeat failures. That's how the homeless industrial complex is forced to operate. Without that, it couldn't keep happening. And again, rinse, wash, and repeat. This is how things go. They just keep doing the same thing over and over again. So the failed grant grifters, they come back for more cash for a new project now, because this time will be different. Then the politicians either decide to jump to other offices, so they move on, they leave the problem for the next person, as numerous people have done, or they start jumping into the grant grifting game themselves, because after all, there's a lot more money over there. And of course, they memory hole every disaster and every problem that they have, try to pretend like it didn't occur, and simply go back and just keep doing it again. And that's one of the big problems, because failure is actually a feature of this process. It's not a bug. That's the whole game, because there is nobody ever held accountable. When it comes to con artists or criminal activity, I don't know why anybody would be involved in the private sector. The real money is in government, because you can keep doing things like this, scam a lot of money off the taxpayers, achieve nothing, and you'll have a ton of defenders out there helping you. In fact, you could even get them to cover your legal costs. And do you think that Bob Ferguson or anybody, he's the Attorney General for Washington State, do you think that guy's ever going to hold these guys accountable? Of course not. This is all about a big grift, and they just keep doing it over and over again. And I'm going to go back. The Port Townsend Free Press has just done a phenomenal job, and I have linked all these articles below. So if you think I'm exaggerating at all what I'm saying here, read those articles, all the source documents attached. They've done a phenomenal job. And it's really important to look at that. So what does this have to do with Ozymandias, right? The Ozymandias. I never pronounced that right. But what does it have to do with that? That was a poem that I started in the beginning. Well, at least in this case, as much as he's mocking the failure of empires and the inevitable collapse of whatever political system that looks permanent today over time, at least they had some stone remnants left over that you could at least find hundreds and thousands of years later. But today, in the modern world, they have nothing to show for it, because their name is, my name is Who Cares? King of the Grift, and look at my success, ye fools, and despair. That's about as close as they're going to get to any kind of a poet would ever be writing about the homeless industrial complex today. And a few years from now, when this building gets ground up and destroyed and disappears, they're going to hope to memory hole it so that nobody will ever remember their failures. Now, I'm talking about Port Townsend, a relatively small city, and a relatively small sum of money. Millions of dollars is no small change to the average person out there, but by government standards, this isn't a big waste of money. It's just a typical way they do business. In the bigger cities like Seattle and Portland and Olympia, Spokane, there's massive sums of money that dwarf this and that are even far more wasteful. And this is why we need people like Jim Scarantino out there at the Port Townsend Free Press doing yeoman's work, actually doing research on projects like this, documenting them, and putting those articles up for all to see and to go back and research and find out what's actually going on in the communities, because the local media is not going to cover this. So when I try to encourage activism, one of the things I do encourage is people starting more websites, local websites, doing local journalism on issues like this, because this kind of story is not going to be covered by the traditional media. That's what being an activist is all about, is covering the truth and exposing it widely for all to see. So with that, if you want to learn more, I do encourage you to look down below, read these articles, and please feel free to share this video with others to encourage them to maybe start stories like this of your own, blog sites or websites of your own, so that you can start reporting on the stories that are being ignored in local media where you live. If you want to learn more, go to wethegovern.com. And remember, as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.